everyone. So I'm Fabiana, and I chose to do my report on Matilda, the book by Roald Dahl, and I've titled it The Child Who Needs No Parents, Matilda and Her Quest to Preserve Individuality. Thank you for listening. So Matilda is a children's novel written by British writer Roald Dahl, who lived from 1916 to 1990. With illustrations by Quentin Blake, the novel tells the story of a young girl of genius intelligence who is fighting for her individuality in an abusive household. The story, published in 1988 by Jonathan Cape, was Dahl's last long children's book before his death in 1990. Dahl's original script portrayed Matilda as a wicked, irrational child. It was only thanks to American editor Stephen Roxburgh that Matilda grew to be an innocent child who manifested superpowers as a reaction to the abuses she endured. Dahl's classic was adapted into many musical theater productions both in the UK and the US before being made into a film starring Danny DeVito as Mr. Wormwood, which is Matilda's father, Rhea Perlman as Mrs. Wormwood, and Mara Wilson as Matilda. The 1996 movie adaptation, and you will see pictures in the following slides from that movie, was changed entirely from the original British setting to an American equivalent and directed by DeVito himself. A film adaptation of the musical was released in 2022 and is available on Netflix. It features Emma Thompson as Miss Trunchbull. In this first slide, you'll see the pictures are original drawings of Matilda on the cover of the first British edition of Dahl's popular novel. Below is Roald Dahl's signature, featured in the copy on sale on Raptus Rare Books for $12,500. This next slide deals with one of the common tropes present in many children's stories, which is absent parents, abandonment, neglect, and abuse, a common trope for children's stories. Despite having parents that are alive and well, Matilda's parents are physically and emotionally absent from Matilda's life. Matilda is abandoned by her family, not just in a physical way. She is left alone at home every weekday afternoon. She is also mocked, belittled, scorned, and her intellectual genius is neglected. The trope of abandonment and neglect is very common in children's stories. In Matilda's case, she is aware of her harmful parents. The story demonstrates the resilience of a young girl who overcomes the difficulties at home by developing superpowers that will eventually extricate her from her parents and allow her to leave their torturous household. In the story, Matilda fights by playing intelligent pranks on her own parents to be able to grow into a free human being. She uses her gifts to help free her loving teacher. That's a doubling of self case, Miss Honey, from the headmistress, Miss Trunchbull, who we will find out later is Miss Honey's aunt. The next slide, this deals with another common trope for children's stories is the doubling of self. And here we find the idea that early on, before meeting Miss Honey, Matilda discovers books, and books are a mirror for her identity. So the surprising fact about Matilda is that whereas the psychological process for most children would be to blame themselves for their parents' abuse and believe that somehow they deserve the pain, Matilda possesses astonishing analytical skills. Despite being so young, under 5 years old, Matilda demonstrates maturity, wisdom, and individuality. In this story, Matilda does not have a human mirror image of self, like Lacan in Lacanian psychoanalysis described. Her books are her mirror image and the doubling of self element until she meets Miss Honey. The first part of the story is dedicated to the discovery of books and the choice to perform revengeful pranks against her abusive parents. Dahl writes that Matilda's rage was escalating to the point that it risked harming her. She decided that every time her father or mother was beastly to her, she would get her own back in some way or another. A small victory or two would help her to tolerate their idiocies and would stop her from going crazy. This was a quote from the book on page 23. Although Matilda longs for loving parents, she accepts reality for what it is and learns through books that crying does not work, and that pain should be met with punishment on those who inflict it. Most children, quote unquote, most children in Matilda's place would have burst into a flood of tears. She didn't do this. She sat there very still and white and thoughtful. She seemed to know that neither crying nor sulking ever got anyone anywhere. The only sensible thing to do when you are attacked is, as Napoleon once said, to counterattack. This was a quote from page 35. In the 1996 movie version, Matilda decides to punish her parents for their behavior after a logical reasoning process. Mr. Wormwood calls her a person who deserves to be punished because Matilda answers a complicated math question and Mr. Wormwood thinks she's cheating, quote unquote. When a person is bad, that person needs to be taught a lesson. After this quote, Matilda deduces that as a person, not a child, because children should respect their parents, she can be bad to her parents. By leveling herself up to the image of a person, Matilda is able to return cruelty in kind through intelligent and pain-inflicting pranks. The first part of the book is dedicated to Matilda's ingenious pranks on her parents. She punishes her father by putting super glue in his hat, scaring him by placing him a talking parrot in the chimney and letting everyone believe it's a ghost, and placing platinum blonde hair peroxide in his daily hair lotion so that his hair not only goes from black to blonde, but his scalp gets burned in the process too. Clever girl. Up until this moment, Matilda has been a very detached genius. She has not received nor been able to give love except for her books. Matilda's heroine journey is a quest for care, acceptance, and love, in addition to the recognition of her genius and preservation of her individuality. The next trope we will analyze is the idea of passing the test. Matilda, the miracle superheroine, wit, wisdom, and supernatural powers to pass the test. Let me just put here the definition of miracle. A miracle is a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. Heroes and heroines in children's stories are often challenged by hardship and difficult tests that show the reader the character's personality. In Matilda, the female protagonist is initially confronted with the challenge to restrain her anger and sadness, as we saw in earlier slides, against her parents. She succeeds in doing so by exercising wisdom, wit, and coming up with intelligent pranks to inflict the humiliation and pain upon her abusive parents, her father especially. In the second part of the story, Matilda is confronted with another abusive character, the headmistress, Miss Trunchbull. Matilda strikes back at Miss Trunchbull during an attempt by the headmistress to humiliate and belittle Matilda in front of the class. Dahl grants Matilda supernatural powers that allow her to move objects by the sheer force of her will and anger. With her usual wit and sense of justice, Matilda teaches Miss Trunchbull a lesson after the headmistress accuses Matilda of putting a newt in the water jug. Quote unquote. With the power of her eyes alone, she had compelled a glass of water to tip and spill its contents over the horrible headmistress, and anybody who could do that could do anything. That's from page 162. Now here we'll analyze the fairy tale within the story. The fairy tale frame story, a strange house and the princess trapped within. Matilda's story is not a classic fairy tale because Matilda herself does not fit in with the classic gender stereotype of the abandoned, defenseless damsel in distress. Matilda is a powerful, independent warrior heroine who is clever, self-centered, because she doesn't play the savior, and generous, because if she's not being abused herself, she places herself in danger only to defend the ones she loves. However, the real protagonist of the fairy tale within the story of Matilda is Miss Honey, who takes on the classic gender role of abused female in need of saving. Miss Honey describes herself as a slave, quote unquote. Over the years, I became so completely cowed and dominated by this monster of an aunt that when she gave me an order, no matter what it was, I obeyed it instantly. That can happen, you know, and by the time I was 10, I had become her slave. That's from page 193. So shy and retiring, Miss Honey is saved by Matilda's powers and restored to her former wealth and dignity, both stolen from her by the classic evil stepmother, or aunt in this case. But their exchange is mutual. Miss Honey gives Matilda love and recognition, and in return, Matilda's wisdom and power of reasoning give Miss Honey the comfort she needs to come out of hiding and tell her story. Once Miss Trunchbull is out of the picture, Matilda's powers subside. They had served their purpose and were now being channeled into education. What do we learn from this story? Nerds are the new cool. Yay! And teachers are their best friends, and students sometimes. So nowadays, there are many examples of cool nerds. Don't we know them? But if some of you went to elementary, junior high school, or high school in the United States at the time Dahl wrote Matilda, chances are you may have been exposed to some of the cruelest treatment and bullying if you, like Matilda, loved books. Until recently, stereotypes of nerds were many. However, as you can see with Matilda, not all nerds are boring and self-righteous. Some can be outright cool trendsetters. Matilda is such a character, and in writing her that way, Dahl subverts traditional gender roles and traditional stereotypes about nerdy children. In today's modern United States education system, a relationship like that of Miss Honey and Matilda would be viewed as inappropriate and even dangerous. And yet, these are the much-needed relationships that many children so desperately want, especially when growing up in cruel, abusive environments. Today, psychologists and therapists have replaced the Miss Honeys of the past. But with their sterile, analytical, pragmatic therapy, it is difficult to imagine how psychologists can replace the tenderness and care of an authentic friendship. That is just my opinion. And the last slide is an interesting extract from a study. Is Matilda a hero? Children's responses to heroism in Roald Dahl's Matilda by James Pope and Julia Round. A very interesting reader response study from 2013 conducted on 150 children aged 7-8 years old who were in year 3 to 10 and 11 years old and in year 6 revealed a lot about how children perceive heroes and what makes a hero. The children were given segments of the 1996 movie Matilda before being questioned. Children in year 3 tended to identify fictional characters as superheroes, while in year 6, many children named their parents. When asked if Matilda was a hero, reasoning was split between her attributes and her actions. Year 3 elected her power and her eyes, while year 6 considered that the use of these powers made her heroic because she saved her friends. A minority in the group thought that Miss Honey was the real hero. Generally speaking, the report concluded that most children were in favor of viewing Matilda as a hero, despite some unheroic acts, like tricks played on her family and on Miss Trunchbull. The children demonstrated a clear sense of right and wrong and a tolerance of negative attributes. And the last slide, we're excited, book by Roald Dahl, Matilda, and the article we just read from by James Pope and Julia Round, Children's Responses to Heroism in Roald Dahl's Matilda. Thank you very much for listening.